Hello and welcome to another episode of the Leaders in STEM podcast from Intergage. My name is Paul Moss. I'm the Business Development and Strategic Partnerships Director here. And as always, I'm joined today by my co-host, Nicky Badwell. Say hi, Nicky.
Hi everyone, I am Business Development Manager here at Intergage, and today's guest on Leaders in STEM is Geoff Busswell, who is Head of Marketing and Sales for Telespazio UK. Telespazio, which is a Leonardo and Thales joint venture, is a global leader in satellite services, specialising in operations, Earth observation, navigation and geospatial solutions, driving innovation in aerospace and telecommunications sectors. Geoff's been at Telespazio for 8 years, having started as head of sales and marketing in their satellite systems and operations division. He also serves as the vice chair for the space specialist group at the Royal Aeronautical Society, contributes as a member of the Satellite Applications Catapult Advisory Group, and also acts as a STEM ambassador in South East England. So, a lot to keep you busy there, Geoff. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, great to be here, Nicky. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks for joining us today. So just to start with then, can you share a little bit about your journey into the industry, your kind of educational background, your career history, and then how that took you through to where you are at Telespazio today?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I've always been really interested in space, and I remember when I was about 15 years old, I read Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, and I'll be honest, I didn't understand much of it when I read it at that age. Yeah, and but it was incredibly exciting to me, and it blew my mind. And even though I didn't understand much of it, I wanted to, and I'd always been very good at maths and physics at school, and it just inspired me to want to study those subjects even more, and I pursued those for a long time. That was what I was interested in, and I did A levels in that area. I did a degree in maths and physics. I did a master's in theoretical physics, and then I did a PhD in astrophysics, because it was the space side of the theoretical physics that I was really interested in. And yeah, I remember during my PhD, I got to go and use some really large telescopes on the tops of mountains, which was very exciting, working nights up there above the clouds and everything. It was fantastic. And I must admit, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do as a career at that stage. I just pursued what I enjoyed. And then I got to the end of my PhD, and I looked for jobs in the space industry, because I was pretty sure I wanted to do something in that area. And actually, it was difficult at the time. That there was a low period in the industry, and there people weren't hiring particularly. And I guess it just shows that things don't always go to plan in your career. And I ended up going for an interview at a company I'd never even heard of before. An agent put me in contact with them. They were called Schlumberger, and they served the oil and gas sector, and they sold reservoir simulators to the big oil and gas companies, which were big computer programs which worked out the best way to produce an oil or gas reservoir. And I was going to be involved in the maths coding of those reservoir simulators, and it was sounded all quite interesting, and the pay was pretty good, and people were really nice. There were a lot of ex-astronomers actually that worked there, and and so I thought, why not, and I did that for 6 years, and I really enjoyed it there. But I always had that space industry sort of there in my heart, that I wanted to do that, and I made that happen with what was then known as Logica in 2008. They were an IT services company that had a space business, and I joined them, and I worked there for 7 years. I had a great time there, and gradually moved sort of through project management into a bit of business development. And then I joined Telespazio UK in 2015, and yeah, been there 8 years. It's flown by, and yeah, now I head up all the sales and marketing activities for Telespazio UK.
Brilliant. So obviously you've got a very, very technical background, Geoff, with your 3 degrees and your doctorate and everything. How did you find that transition through to sales and marketing? I can't imagine that's the particular angle within the space industry that you maybe imagined going into when you started out.
Yeah, it's a great question actually, because I think if you'd have said to me 20 years ago what I'd be doing now, I don't think I would have believed you really. And just thinking back, the I remember in Logica, that's when the transition started to happen. I did a very technical role in Schlumberger, although I think the traits there about standing up and talking about one's work were still there, because I presented at a lot of conferences when I worked within Schlumberger. So I guess I always had that in me. But when I was at Logica, I became I was managing a couple of programs, and the way things worked in those programs was I was delivering projects for the European Space Agency, and the European Space Agency, they have what they call technical officers, and their technical officers are very technical people, but they're also responsible for the contracts as a whole, and they like engaging with people from that are delivering projects for them that are technical minded, but that are able to run a program, and also to be able to think about what comes next and how to help them deliver what ESA have in mind. And so that suited me very well. I got on well with the ESA technical officers, and they liked talking to me about my ideas about what they could do next. And that's where it came from really, because then the Stuart Martin, who was the business director of the space division at Logica then, he came to me one day and he said, how do you fancy spending 5 days a month doing business development in conjunction with your project delivery activities? And so I said, of course, that sounds great. And then the 5 days turned into 10, and the 10 turned into 20, and then suddenly that's what I was doing. And I've never looked back from there really. And I love the new stuff that's coming. I love seeing the new stuff, the seeds of that forming, and then being part of how we can bid something or offer a solution to a customer that then turns into something tangible. When I've grown from there, and now I'm a manager of a sales team. So it's been an interesting journey.
Who knew it? A scientist that became a sales and marketing guy.
I know. Yeah,
It's weird.
What can I say? Yeah.
No, but I think something you said there was really interesting, in the sense that having that technical background and also having that passion for the work for customers are delivering. I think that's really critical. I guess it gives you credibility from the get-go, and you can establish rapport perhaps much more quickly than somebody that's come in from an alternate direction, purely commercial direction.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the customers care, of course, about their programs, and so I think I don't have to fake that I'm passionate. It's just there. So it just comes through naturally, and I think that helps excite customers about their programs and about what myself and the team at Telespazio can do for them.
So that's a very nice lead into some questions I wanted to ask Geoff about Telespazio. So before we get into a little bit more of the detail about your specific role and what you're looking to achieve, tell us a bit more about Telespazio and what you're doing for customers in the space sector.
Yeah, sure. So Telespazio is a space services company, one of the leading space services companies in the world, and we focus very much on what we call the downstream side of the sector. So of course, when a lot of people think about the space industry, they're thinking about building and launching satellites or people, and that is absolutely very, very exciting. But we're more on the side of how do you utilize the technology out there in space, the remote sensing side of things, which we call Earth observation, the satellite communications side of things, the satellite navigation side of things. How do you use those technologies for public good, to support other sectors in their businesses? So that's what we're all about. But we do work together with a sister company called Thales Space. So together, Telespazio and Thales Space form something called the Space Alliance. And Thales Space, or TAS, as they're known as, they are focused on the manufacturing of the satellites and the upstream side of the space sector, as we call it, and then Telespazio, as I said, on the downstream side. So together we have that end-to-end approach from the manufacture, build, and launch of satellites through to how you utilize satellites to benefit us all ultimately.
Okay, so in simple layman's terms, the upstream side is making things that you shoot up into space.
Yes.
And the downstream side that Telespazio are most involved in is utilizing those assets and leveraging those assets once they're up there, and providing value. And I would imagine as well, we're from an earth science perspective, we're in a very interesting period of time, aren't we, with climate change? And also, there's a lot of talk in social media about conflicts in the future not being so much about oil and gas, albeit we've had, probably 100 years of that. Increasingly, it'll be about supply of water and access to other resources that support the human population. So, am I right in thinking that your technology is utilizing, your services are really about utilizing the technology that's up in space to look at those kinds of things?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And if I could give some examples. You're right. We're helping to, first of all, get the data and the information down from space. So ground segment, as we call it in the sector, is an absolute core offering of Telespazio. So how do you get this data? That it could be live communication channels, or it could be observations taken by satellites that need to be downlinked somehow. How do you get that information from space down to a ground station? And that's one of the specialty areas of Telespazio, that we have a number of ground stations that we utilize. You touched on this a little bit there. The Earth observation data side of things, there's a huge amount of observations that you can make from space, which I never knew about, and really inspired me when I first started working in the sector, actually, because in my head, I knew about satellite imagery, that you could take a picture from space. Mm-hmm. But what I hadn't appreciated, which absolutely fascinated me, was that you can measure things about the environment, about the Earth system from space. So you mentioned water. I mean, of course, the biggest water bodies on our planet are our oceans, and you can learn things about the oceans from space. You can measure the temperature of the oceans from space. You can measure the sea level from space. You can measure the thickness of the ice sheets at the poles from space. You can measure greenhouse gas content in the atmosphere, so methane and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere from a satellite. I think that's incredible.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons we know what we do about climate change and the fact it's a problem, and having that evidence base that's been built up over a long time, that we can challenge ultimately our leaders in the world with, that we have to take action. That's come from space. We would not have that evidence base without being able to measure climate change variables, for example, from satellites. Yeah.
And I would imagine, as well as obviously, shall we say, providing a way to draw down the data that's being collected from sensors in space, whether they're optical or thermal, or, as you say, sort of measuring greenhouse gases in the atmosphere.
Yeah.
I would imagine that there's a big job of work to be done in terms of handling that data, managing that data, deriving insights from that data? Is that something that Telespazio
Yeah,
is heavily involved in?
absolutely. Yeah. There is a huge volume of data, and it's just going up and up and up. There's a lot of Earth observation missions that are sort of funded by governments around the world, and the amount of data there is incredible. But there's also commercial endeavors where you might get higher resolution data from optical or radar than what is available publicly as well. So there's a huge amount of data, and you're right. Yes, Telespazio has been right at the heart of actually providing a way to manage all that data, and and so it's available to the community to be able to go in and do a query in a search window, and I want sea surface temperature data, or I want climate projections of different climate scenarios over the next decades. And we were involved in the Copernicus program to build something called the Climate Data Store, which is Europe's kind of one-stop shop to go and find climate data, much of which has been measured by satellites.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I remember very recently actually watching a documentary series you may have seen on Netflix called Connected. And there was an episode there where they were using some of this Earth observation data, and I found it quite incredible joining the dots between what might be considered completely disparate bits of information, but sort of cause and effect stuff across a range of different data sets that were being collected. From algae growth in various parts of the world to salt concentrations to all sorts of
Yeah,
stuff. It's quite incredible.
it is. You're right. Yeah. That's another one. Yeah, just how salty the oceans are. You can measure that from space, and
Yeah,
it's it's incredible. But you're right. The planet's an interconnected system, and so actually, while we're not at the heart of the cutting edge science necessarily, because the scientists take this data and use it, but of course the atmosphere, the land, and the oceans are connected systems, and so having the observations of all those three areas is really important to challenge the scientific models to make sure that they are the best models out there. Yeah.
fantastic. So I know that you're a passionate advocate for STEM, um, as a sort of a subject area, but also in
Yeah.
terms of career opportunities for people.
Yeah.
And earlier in the conversation, Geoff, you mentioned that when you were first, when you first graduated, you were obviously very passionate about the space sector. You were looking for opportunities, and things were a little, shall we say, a little bit dry in that respect for a period of time. I mean, was that off the back of the kind of reduction in government budgets on space exploration after, sort of the demise of the Apollo projects and latterly the space shuttle project and that sort of thing? I mean, what was happening there? And
Yeah, it's a good question. I think we didn't have the big European programs then. So there's the two big ones are Galileo, which is the Europe satellite navigation system, so Europe's GPS basically,
yeah,
and Copernicus is the Earth observation program of Europe, and they were being developed, but they hadn't ramped up properly at that stage. I think we didn't have in the UK, we didn't have a UK space agency then, so things weren't very joined up across government. We didn't have we didn't have the satellite applications catapult, which has been important to connect academia and industry and help bring that research through to be commercialized. So I think, yeah, a number of reasons, and yeah, all that changed. We had a space agency in 2009. The catapult started up just after that as well, and so things have picked up. It's been a busy 15 years for sure.
yeah, yeah. But when I talk to leaders in industrial companies in general and some of the trade bodies, it's very clear that um, in addition to the various geopolitical challenges we've been facing over the last few years, what with Brexit and the pandemic, and more recently wars in sort of Eastern Europe, there's a massive issue with the skills gap.
Yeah.
You know, what's your perspective on that, and how do you think that the sort of ambassadorial activities that you and some of your colleagues undertake are seeking to sort of, in a way, address that skills gap?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's one of the biggest challenges we face internally is resourcing, about finding talent, because, and it's not just us, it's a wider problem within the sector, and there is not enough not enough people coming through with the right skills. But we also have to do as much as we can to signpost people that are enthusiastic about wanting to come into the space sector, but also to actually get the message out there that it's not rocket science, right? So sometimes it is,
Yeah,
if you're a rocket propulsion engineer, but actually the major work, as I've talked about, that I've been involved in, and what Telespazio do, is about exploitation. It's about use of clever software, data management techniques, and engineering techniques to actually utilize the assets that we have in space. So there's a lot of engineering roles and technical roles there, but there's also a lot of roles across the space sector which are non-technical as
right.
well. We need business leaders. That's often a failing in the sector, where technically there's some really good ideas, but actually turning that into something that's viable commercially is often not there. So
Yeah,
business leaders, geographers, uh, people in HR, in marketing and communications, psychologists that work with astronauts. There's a whole host of careers out there that are also non-technical for sure. But in terms of STEM specifically, I mean, we try and do our best to offer initiatives and be part of the initiatives that are out there. So in terms of the STEM ambassador program, I mean, I'm a STEM ambassador. There's a number of us in Telespazio that Telespazio UK that are STEM ambassadors too. There's something called the SEPNet program, which is helped publicized by the STEM ambassadorial program, but it's an initiative where companies can publish projects through SEPNet, and students apply, and they can get an 8-week placement in the summer to do that particular project. And because the projects have been suggested by industry, it's aligned to what industry wants to do. So it's a great way of students doing their degree primarily. This is for between second and third year, or third and fourth year, to get work experience in a company.
but
We
they're
do
also delivering value to the companies concerned, which is great.
exactly, yeah, total win-win, yeah.
Yeah,
And we've also done more recently, we did a 5-day satellite communications engineering course to a group of 12 A-level students, and they got to have seminars by different specialists within the company, but there was also a lot of practical work that they did as well. And we also arranged for them to go and visit Airbus, the Airbus clean rooms as well in that time. So yeah, we try and open the eyes for sure, and do our bit with the younger generation. Yeah.
oh, that's absolutely fantastic.
The other thing I'm very keen to mention on the STEM side is something called the Telespazio Technology Contest, or T-Tech. So if you Google T-Tech, you'll find it. And this is something that Telespazio started a few years ago, and it's a technology contest open to students and researchers from all over the world. And so there's some macro themes that are suggested, and then different universities, which is where the applications generally come from, are able to offer ideas against that. And then each year there's a set of awards and cash prizes that's funded by Telespazio. So this year, in the European Space Conference in Brussels, which is coming up at the end of this month, the winners of this year's T-Tech program will be announced. And so this is a really good way of encouraging the really innovative ideas from universities, and having some nice rewards, cash rewards, but there's also some support that can be provided as well to help take those ideas through into commercialization. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Great project to be involved with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think now just looking to the future a bit and future prospects for Telespazio. Obviously, space tech and discovery is such an exciting area to be working in. We've just seen the launch of the Peregrine mission yesterday. At the time of recording, we're not sure how that's all going to have been gone by the time this episode goes out. But looking forward, what are the other emerging trends that you see kind of shaping the space industry in the next few years?
Yeah. So I think launch is definitely a really important area. So the cheaper that you can get mass into space lowers the cost threshold, basically, to be able to build businesses based on assets that are in space. So SpaceX are changing the game on this. And we've seen the Falcon 9, now the Falcon Heavy. SpaceX are building something called Starship, which is pretty exciting when you see their launches and some of the explosions that have happened off the pad. I don't know if anyone watching that's played Kerbal Space Program, where you get to do your own launches off, build your own spacecraft and launch off the pad, and you get some great explosions. It's just like that. And yeah, I mean, Starship is going to be able to launch about 150 tons into low Earth orbit, and you compare that to the European Space Agency's Ariane 5 spacecraft, which is about 20 tons. So you see sort of more than 7 times more, but then you get that economy of scale, and then the cost per kilogram is just so much lower. So I think that's a major thing. We're also seeing launch being planned from the UK as well. So there are some spaceports that there's 2 that now have licenses, one in Cornwall and the other is in Shetland.
Yeah.
And there's other companies like Orbex in Sutherland that are I think they've also got their license actually as well. So it's 3. Yeah. So yeah, launch from UK soil is going to be exciting as well. And yeah, what does that mean overall in terms of having launch capability and lower cost into orbit? And it means you can do things you couldn't do before. So I think one of the really interesting examples of that is solar power from space.
Yeah.
And this is an opportunity to actually harness the sun's power with solar cells in space, and then be able to transmit that energy via radio effectively through to ground stations on the Earth. And it's a completely clean form of energy. You're tapping into 24/7 energy from the sun.
The world's biggest nuclear fusion reactor. Well, the solar system's biggest nuclear fusion reactor, right?
Or the equivalent of that. Yeah, of course, it doesn't take any. Yeah, you'll utilize. Yeah, the sun is, of course, a nuclear reactor. Yeah, so you're utilizing that ultimately. Yeah, and what that produces. But you couldn't do that without Starship, probably, because the size of the infrastructure that you need to build in space to do that is immense. You're going to need a number of Starship launches. So if you don't have Starship, it would take too many launches, but also the cost per kilogram that probably wouldn't make the enterprise viable. So I think that's another exciting area, and the whole area of in orbit assembly as well. So traditionally, you mentioned the shuttle earlier, and we've had Ariane 5 and SpaceX, but ultimately you're confined right now, whatever vehicle you've got, even if you've got Starship, you're confined to the payload bay effectively, and the dimensions of that. And what you want to do really is be able to launch parts of an infrastructure into space, and then have that assembly of that infrastructure done in space.
Yeah.
And so all the automation techniques, yes, you might have humans there, but the more you can automate that, the more efficient and cost effective all that is. So that's a really big area as well, in orbit assembly. Yeah.
And I guess that leads to various opportunities in terms of, as you say, the energy collection
Yeah.
from the solar system. But you've also got the opportunity, I guess, and there's a lot of arguments at the moment as to the priority for this, but the sort of staging point for the interplanetary exploration. So whether it's Moonbase Alpha, or whether it's some sort of 2001 space station that's in high orbit.
And that's definitely another area. What we refer to in the sector as the lunar economy.
Right.
And NASA has stated its ambition, and it's a fair way down this journey now, in wanting to place the first woman on the moon and the first man of color on the moon within a few years. Now we're looking at that will happen before 2030, but that's part of wider plans around the world for getting back to the moon. So in terms of the European Space Agency and the role that ESA will play there, Telespazio's very much involved in that, and ESA are planning something called Moonlight, which is to offer communications and navigation services around the moon. So if you want to have permanent inhabitants on a lunar base, you need commodity services like communications and navigation. You also need some kind of orbiting station around the moon as well. So just like we've got the ISS around the Earth, and we have astronauts that go there and live typically for 6 months at a time, the plan is that what's called the lunar gateway would be an ISS around the moon. So you'd have astronauts that would live on the lunar gateway, and then that's an easy staging post to take a lander and go down to do jobs, tasks on the moon, or even stay on the surface for an extended period of time. Yeah.
Wow.
There's so many exciting projects in the offing. I'm sure there's many, many more that we don't have time to talk about as well today, Geoff. But how's Telespazio positioning itself to meet some of these future demands and continue to grow in the marketplace?
Yeah. So we've had some exciting news recently, actually. So we've just made an acquisition in November of last year. So a company called E2E, who specialize in satellite communications engineering. So we've acquired them. We see it very much as a merger of two similar sized companies, and they're going to be moving into our premises over the next few months. So that extends our satellite communications expertise. I've talked about Moonlight and about how Telespazio is very involved in that. So we led one of the studies for ESA on how you would offer communications and navigation services, and there's a next phase to that program which we will hear about in the next few weeks, hopefully there. So that's going to be exciting. I think there's things like optical communications that Telespazio are very interested in. So what I mean by that is the ability, I talked earlier about the ability to get data from space to ground. And there's some new technology out there using optical communication links, so effectively optical lasers. And the benefit of doing that and using a laser to communicate with some kind of terminal or ground station on the ground, you can send a huge amount of data via those channels, much more than you can with other technology.
So is that almost like a kind of the space to ground equivalent of super fiber optics, because you're using light to transmit the data?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. You have to be very accurate with your pointing when you do that, and of course the Earth's atmosphere sometimes causes a problem for that, because it distorts the signal. You get a bit of refraction through the atmosphere. So you have to get your pointing very, very accurate. But yes, you actually need a lot lower mass technology in space to do that as well. So there's a lot of benefits to it. Yeah, so that's something we're looking at,
Fantastic.
which is quite interesting. I think the whole area of one of the areas I should have said probably in terms of the future trends is sustainability, space sustainability. And what I mean by that is the number of satellites that are getting launched now is a huge amount more than it was even 5 years ago. And so we have to be responsible for how we use the space environment. So there's a lot of regulatory action getting put in place, and basically what we're saying is, and what's needed across the industry is that when you launch a satellite into space, you take responsibility as a launching company and as a launching country, that there is a plan to get rid of that spacecraft once it's done its job. So that could just be burning up in the atmosphere after, if it's in low Earth orbit, or it could be moving it to a much higher orbit where it's not in the way of congested orbits. And Telespazio, we're very interested in that area more generally. It's critical that we use space in the right way, but it's also important from even a sort of defense and military perspective, actually, because there are high value and important national assets in space that aggressive foreign powers want to interfere with, and therefore it's important that we have observations of what's going on up there. And Telespazio has made some inroads in the sense of making an impact. So we invested in a company called North Star in Canada, who are launching a small set of satellites to do these observations from space, because you can see a lot better from there of what's going on, rather than making observations of other assets in space from the ground. And then what you do with that data and all the analytics and the AI technology involved with taking that data and having automated alerts if something happens in the space environment that is abnormal, if you like, is very important. So that's another area we're looking at. Yeah,
it's fantastic.
I think there's so much going on in the sector, isn't there? And obviously it's a very competitive and expanding sector, space and satellites.
Yeah.
What sort of challenges are you guys meeting? Is it in terms of competition, or is it more around just keeping up with the very rapid evolution of what your customers are doing?
Yeah, I'd say probably the two main challenges, one I've already mentioned, is definitely resourcing and attracting the skills, because we certainly have ambitious growth plans in our company over the next 5 years. But the sector more generally, when you sort of look at the different surveys that are done by different companies that have been commissioned by the UK Space Agency to investigate this kind of thing, the general conclusion is that we can't serve the growth of the sector by the traditional routes of people coming through and that exist inside the sector right now. So that's where what I was saying earlier about attracting people from other sectors that have expertise in technologies that can be used in the space industry. So a lot of software technologies and artificial intelligence technologies, all these kind of things are being used in other sectors, but these people have skills that can be useful to the space sector. So that's absolutely vital that we obviously maintain the attraction of people that are interested in the space sector, but also making our sector attractive to people in other sectors as well. I'd say the other area probably is that the business models are changing as well. So traditionally, maybe 15, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, there's a lot of government and intergovernment agency funded programs. These days, there's a lot of investment occurring by companies to take the initiative themselves and maybe ask support from a government agency to do something. And if I take Moonlight as an example, then there's a lot of money coming from the European Space Agency. We're talking hundreds of millions of euros to create Moonlight, but ESA are asking industry to invest with them. And then the idea is that the service that's offered is not offered like it maybe what once would have been by the government or intergovernmental agency themselves, but it's offered by a commercial company. And the company's invested in that themselves, so they got some skin in the game. They then take responsibility ultimately for offering that service, which in this case would be the communication and navigation services around the moon. But they reap the reward. Yes, they've invested, but they reap the reward of offering that services and making a profit out of those services from the supply chain that will buy those services.
Yeah, Geoff, on that note, I'm sort of interested to understand if that means that, in a sense, the commercial opportunity for Telespazio has opened up, because you can, in principle, deal with organizations beyond the intergovernmental agencies or, the space agencies that we were perhaps all more familiar with, and your commercial opportunity is with a much broader range of organizations.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. So if you think about in a few years' time, once NASA and ESA and the Artemis program has evolved, and we have the Lunar Gateway in place, we've made going to the moon more routine, and we have these commodity services in place, there is a whole industry of commercial companies that are interested in going to the moon. And it can be to demonstrate their own technology with their own exploration rovers, or it could be to actually mine for resources on the moon. For example, we know that there's water ice in the poles, and that there's a business there if someone can get there and be able to exploit that's the only way really we're going to be able to have a semi-permanent presence on the moon, if we can actually utilize the resources there.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I can imagine, taking it to a slightly more mundane level, we're going to get to a point maybe in the next 30, 40 years where FedEx and DPD and UPS will be delivering stuff to people that are based not on the Earth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, maybe we could have some kind of Earth lunar drone service. I don't know.
Yeah, Amazon Lunar Prime or something.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
But it's not beyond the realms of possibility, is it? I mean, as humans start to
things that are going to become reality are just unimaginable to us at the moment, but they'll probably happen within our lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of, from what you've said, about the opportunities within the sector, I'm sort of starting to wish I was 30 odd years younger, because it's an area that's always fascinated me. I come from it's interesting actually. You mentioned the spaceport down in Cornwall. That will be on the site of the former RAF St Morgan, isn't it?
I don't know if that's an RAF site. I know they're certainly using Cornwall Airport as part of it.
Yeah, well, that was the original Nimrod airfield.
Yeah,
because my dad served many years ago, and he's the guy that got me interested in all the space stuff and avionics and everything else. But yeah, it's been quite interesting to see how that's been developing. So, are there any, you've had a sort of a fairly long and varied career, and you're clearly absolutely passionate about the space sector. Are there any particular high moments that stand out for you on a sort of a personal and emotional level that relate to what you do day to day? I mean, you've got to meet some really interesting people.
Yeah, that's right. I think probably the one that stands out is back in 2015-16 time. You might remember Tim Peake.
Yeah,
he was our first official ESA astronaut, he flew to the space station for 6 months. And this connection happened through my Royal Aeronautical Society vice chair of the space group work. So it turns out Tim is a fellow of the Royal Aeronautical Society, and before he went into space, he emailed the society and he said, would we be interested in him doing some kind of live link up with the society? And I was copied in on this email, and of course I jumped at the chance, and I iterated with him over this, and before we went into space, and we were going to organise a UK spaceports conference at the Royal Aeronautical Society, and I thought this would be quite a nice event where we could do Tim's link up, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't. It felt too good to be true that this could happen, and it's one of those things you think, well, I'm gonna give this every chance, but probably something's gonna go wrong with it. And what Tim said to me at the time was that I can do this, and you'll get 15 minutes with me, and I'll give you a tour, a live video tour of the space station. But he said, what we can't do is we can't make it official, because all official engagements that I do have to go via NASA's communications office, and then there's a whole load of overhead to that, which would have been too difficult to navigate. So it was in his personal time. And he said the other thing is, because it's unofficial, you can't tell anyone about it.
Right.
So none of the conference delegates knew. We had on the program, we just had a TBC on the program. There were a few select people on the organizing committee of the conference that knew about it. And I remember I had to go in the week before the conference. I did a rehearsal with NASA at 4 Hamilton Place, which is the RAS HQ. And the reason for that is because there's some special software that we had to install on the laptop there and make sure it worked and everything. So I was striding up and down the stage, talking to someone at NASA to check that this software worked. And you have to remember, this was 2016. So I don't know if you remember back then, even doing telecons back then, there was always a problem.
Yeah.
That you couldn't get the telecom to work, and that was just an audio. That's just an audio link. This was a live video link from the International Space Station to the Royal Aeronautical Society. The Society had never done anything like this before. They'd never even done a live link up with anyone before, let alone to do it with someone from space. So I'm thinking, oh my God, if this doesn't work, I'm standing up in front of a load of conference delegates, and what if this doesn't work? Anyway, we got to the time, and I stood up and I basically told everyone in the audience what was about to happen. And of course, everyone was very excited, and then suddenly, Tim comes on.
Wow.
And it was brilliant, and he took us round for we got longer than 15 minutes actually. He floated around the space station, gave us a tour of the whole thing, and then he went into the cupola, which is the big window that has a great panoramic view of the Earth. And we had all this was getting projected on the back wall in the society, and he did Q&A in the cupola, and it was just mind-blowing, because the whole planet Earth was just spinning in the back shot of Tim on the screen in the Royal Aeronautical Society, and he did Q&A for us. And then the link cut off. Actually, we got about 25 minutes from him, and then there was some weather event, and his comms link died. But we were only meant to get 15 minutes with him anyway, so
That's phenomenal.
we did all right. But it was just amazing. It's one of those kind of moments that you just
proper pinch me.
Didn't you get to surprise some young people as well at one point?
Yeah, that was another really good moment actually as well. So that, again, I just can't thank Tim enough for the time he gives.
Isn't he?
And this is even better in many ways actually. So Tim came and gave an evening lecture at the Royal Aeronautical Society. So this was, again, post space. it was about his time in space, and it was an evening lecture. And what was suggested was by the Royal Aeronautical Society, because they have a young person's program. They said, would you come and be part of that with some kids from disadvantaged schools in the area? So we invited all these children along from local schools, and none of them knew actually that Tim was gonna be there. It was a surprise. And so they learned about being an astronaut all morning, and different experiments with stomp rockets and all good stuff like that. And then the lady that was running it, Jo, she I can't remember the exact narrative that she had, but she told them to close their eyes, bow their heads, close their eyes, and if you think about amazing things, sometimes they come true. And they've been learning about Tim Peake during the morning, so they'd seen lots of him. And then during that moment, Tim walks in, goes on the stage, and then they all open their eyes and they see him there. And I filmed it actually occur just for my own personal use, really, because it was just such a magic moment.
Yeah.
And then actually I told Tim about it by email afterwards, and he said, oh, could you send me that actually for my own records, because I'd love to see that. So I did, of course. And then someone from ESA got in contact with me from their public relations department, because they said, this is great, we want to put this out on our social media. So it got a couple of 100,000 hits on the ESA
Brilliant.
social media. And all these kids opening their eyes, and I've watched it back so many times, and every one of them reacts in a different way,
Yeah.
and it's just absolutely magic. Yeah.
I mean, absolutely heartwarming. I can imagine. You must have been welling up when you saw that.
Yeah, to be honest, I even get a little bit emotional talking about it now. It's
Yeah.
just incredible. Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
Go into a career in space now. You think a lot of them will have been inspired, won't they?
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, as I say, once again, just Tim, he's such an amazing ambassador for us, and can't thank him enough for his time. Yeah.
So if you were talking to sitting down with a small number of young people, maybe they're in the sort of early part of their secondary school journey, is there any particular advice that you give to them in terms of building a career in the space sector?
Yeah, I'd say first thing, do what you enjoy, right? And there'll be some people where the space sector is not for them. Fine, but when you're involved in a career, that's what you're doing the majority of your waking hours. So
Yeah.
it's vital that you have some kind of passion for what you do, I think. So follow what you enjoy. And as I said earlier, I didn't really know what I wanted to do as a precise job till I was in my mid-20s. I studied till I was in my mid-20s, but I just had that passion for something, for space, and I followed that. So I'd say do what you enjoy, aim high. You if you always succeed, then probably you aren't aiming high enough.
Right.
So even though failing sometimes hurts, actually, if you've aimed high, even if you just miss what you aimed at, you've probably done pretty well anyway.
Yeah. So your own personal moonshots, then, that would be your advice.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I'd say sort of healthy in body and in mind. So just trying to keep a reasonable level of fitness and eat the right things. I've always found that's helped me a lot. I just find that I can concentrate for longer. I can solve problems quicker and faster. I remember talking to someone a few years back about eating habits just during a day, actually. And it wasn't necessarily about what you eat, although of course it's better to eat good things than bad things. But I definitely related to what they said, because I'd have have breakfast in the morning, and actually by late morning I'd start to flag, and I wouldn't be as productive. And I always have some kind of a small snack bar or something mid morning and mid afternoon, and it keeps my energy levels up, and I can achieve more in a day. And then I think the final thing I'd say is just some kind of method that you have to de-stress and wind down,
Yeah.
whatever that is, and that's different for everyone.
So what's yours then, Geoff? Apart from having a snack bar twice a day, what do you do to wind down?
I love running, so I've
Yeah.
run since I was young, and I still do that. I took up karate actually about 4 years ago. So
we can have a chat about that. I've 30 years in the karate world.
Oh right, okay.
Plus actually now, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we should do. Yeah, so I've got to purple belt, so I'm two off black now.
Yeah.
But whatever it is, it's doing something that takes your mind off the day job, that helps you de-stress, based on what's happened that day, or where some things particularly frustrated you, because a lot of jobs can be stressful, and mine can be, for sure. I work in a bidding and a sales environment, and there's deadlines all the time, and you can burn out very quickly if you don't have a way of unwinding. And that's different for everyone. It's not necessarily exercise, even it could be jigsaws or knitting or whatever, but something that works for you. So that'd be the final thing I'd say. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic, Geoff. It's been an absolutely brilliant conversation. I've been absolutely fascinated. How can our listeners get in touch with you and with Telespazio?
So we have a info address on our website. I could just spell it out now quickly. It's info_UK@telespazio.com. But if you go to the website, go to the contact us bit, you'll find the email. So that's actively monitored, that account, and we can pass you on to the right people, whether it's me or someone else in the organisation. But absolutely encourage people to get in touch with us.
Fantastic.
Well, Geoff, thank you so much for joining us today on Leaders in STEM with Intergage. It's been such an interesting discussion, learning more about the space industry and all of the different projects that is coming up for you guys. You can also find us on LinkedIn at Intergage Marketing Engineers, or on our website at marketing-engineers.co.uk. Thanks so much again for your time today, Geoff.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Geoff.